You're great behind the scenes, but that's not what this moment needs. We're letting you go."
The words didn't land like a thunderclap. They landed like dust, quiet and final. And in that silence, something in me shifted. My name is Camilla Rowan, and for nearly a decade, I was the person people at Beacon and Brand turned to when the stakes were highest, when a contract teetered on the edge, when a client threatened to walk, when a pitch had to be salvaged with 48 hours' notice. I was the one they called, not because I was loud, not because I had a flashy resume, but because I got results. It was a Thursday morning in mid-December. Minneapolis was blanketed in snow, the kind that quiets everything except the hum of fluorescent lights and the buzz of the heating vents in our 17th floor office. I was wrapping up final preparations for what should have been the biggest win of my career, a $40 million enterprise marketing partnership with Carrington Digital. 11 months of meetings, follow-ups, product demos, late-night research and strategy calls had finally paid off. The deal wasn't just big, it was historic, the largest in Beacon and Brand's 23-year history. And it was mine. I was running through a checklist in my project tracker when Marcia Dunning stepped into my office without knocking. Marcia had joined 2 months ago as the new regional director brought in from the New York office with a Harvard MBA. Endless confidence and a habit of speaking in terms like synergistic alignment and vertical velocity. She was all polish and posture-red lipstick, tailored coats, and high expectations. She smiled the way people do when they're about to deliver news that's already been decided behind closed doors. "Camilla," she began smoothly, "we're making a slight adjustment to the client meeting schedule for next week." I looked up. Pen paused over my notes. "Carrington," I asked. "Yes, I'll be leading the final presentation," she said, as if she were telling me the weather forecast. "I'll need you to transfer all your files by end of day today." The words didn't compute at first. "I'm sorry, what?" She tilted her head like I'd misunderstood. "You've done excellent groundwork, truly, but this stage is delicate. Strategic optics matter. Executive presence. Elliot Carrington needs to see we're putting our top leadership on this. It's a formality." I stared at her, heart thudding. "You think I'm not executive enough?" Marcia didn't flinch. "You're incredibly capable, but the Carrington deal is more than just a transaction. It's a relationship-building opportunity, a brand moment." I felt the familiar weight settle in my chest, the weight of being good, but never quite the face they wanted. Not enough polish, not enough pedigree, not loud enough in meetings, not Ivy League enough, just steady, dependable. Camilla who never made waves. "Have you spoken to Walter about this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. She gave a small shrug. "Walter agrees with the direction. It's what's best for the firm." Of course he did. Walter Hensley. Our CEO was the kind of man who once told me I was a stealth asset, which I later realized was code for someone he didn't feel the need to promote. I nodded slowly. "You'll have the files by 5. Marcia smiled as if we were teammates. "Appreciate your professionalism, Camilla." She left, and I sat frozen for a full minute, staring at the blinking cursor on my screen. Then I stood, gathered the presentation decks, timelines, budget breakdowns, everything I had poured myself into for nearly a year, and prepared to hand them off. That afternoon, as I was about to leave, I received a calendar invite. Subject: quick sync. Leadership time: 4:30 p.m. Location: Walter's executive conference room. Required attendees: me, Walter Hensley, HR Director, Janine Mosley. My blood ran cold. I walked into that room with a strange sense of detachment, like I was floating just outside my own body. The room smelled faintly of lemon polish and printer toner. Walter sat at the head of the long walnut table, hands folded. Janine sat beside him, tablet in hand, face unreadable. "Camilla," Walter said, standing slightly before motioning for me to sit. "Thanks for making time on short notice." I sat but didn't speak. Walter gave me a practiced smile, the same one he used in client videos and quarterly updates. "You've done outstanding work for us over the years, especially with Carrington. We're grateful." A pause. But as we look ahead to 2024, we're making structural changes to better align with our growth trajectory. Effective today, we're consolidating business development roles across regions, I blinked. You're eliminating my position. We're sunsetting a few legacy roles. Janine cut in, voice smooth, as part of a larger strategic vision. Sunsetting strategic vision. So many nice words to hide what this was. You're firing me, I said flatly. Walter flinched. We truly appreciate everything you've contributed. 3-month severance, Janine added, sliding a slim manila envelope across the table. Health benefits through March. And of course, a letter of recommendation. I looked at them both. No apology, no shame, just discomfort. You're doing this. 3 days before a 40 million signing. Walter hesitated. The deal's in good hands. You mean Marcia Camilla, he said gently. You're valued, but perception matters with enterprise clients. Leadership representation. I'm not polished enough, I said. Not Ivy enough. Not loud enough. Nobody answered. I stood slowly, picked up the envelope and placed it in my bag. Thank you, I said. And I walked out. No drama, no begging. Just the quiet dignity of someone who had given everything and been dismissed anyway. That night, I packed my office alone. Owen Pratt, my closest colleague, came by. This is insane, he said. You built that deal from scratch. I wrapped my Ohio State diploma in tissue paper and tucked it gently into a box. They made their choice, I said softly. They're going to regret it, he whispered. I didn't answer. But deep down, I knew something they didn't. They thought they were getting the deal, but they had no idea who Elliot Carrington really trusted. I spent Friday morning in yoga pants, sipping lukewarm coffee at my kitchen counter, trying to pretend I wasn't spiraling. My apartment was quiet, save for the sound of wind whistling against the window panes. Outside Minneapolis looked postcard-perfect soft snow on rooftops, the downtown skyline wrapped in fog. Inside, my world felt hollowed out. Everything I'd built, everything I'd sacrificed for Beacon and Brand, was boxed and stacked beside the front door. My phone vibrated on the counter, breaking the silence. A text from an unknown number lit up the screen. Hey, it's Paige. Don't freak out. Elliot asked about you in the meeting this morning. Call me when you can. I stared at the message, heart suddenly racing. Paige Ellerton, and I hadn't talked in over a year. Not since she'd accepted the general counsel role at Carrington Digital. We'd met during a pro bono project early in our careers and had kept in loose contact through industry events and late-night LinkedIn D when things at work got tough. But this was something else. I called immediately. Camilla Page answered on the first ring. Please tell me it's not true. What's not true? That Beacon fired you? I exhaled slowly. They restructured, my position was eliminated, right after I handed off the Carrington deal. There was a pause. Elliot is livid. I blinked. He knows. He walked into our morning leadership call, expecting you to be on the prep for Monday. When Marcia tried to spin it, he cut her off mid-sentence and said, if Camilla's not involved, I need to rethink everything. A strange mix of dread and satisfaction coursed through me. I didn't tell him, I said quietly. Didn't want to seem unprofessional. Well, he knows now, and he's furious. He wants to speak with you. My throat tightened. Paige, I don't work there anymore. I'm not talking about Beacon. He wants to speak with you, period. There was a knock at my door. I jumped, startled. A courier stood in the hallway, holding a slim envelope. Camilla Rowan, he asked. I nodded. He handed me the envelope and walked off without another word. Inside was a crisp piece of Carrington Digital letterhead. Ms. Rowan, I was surprised to hear of your departure. Let's meet privately tomorrow, 10:30 a.m. My office. Elliot Carrington. I stared at the note like it might vanish if I blinked. The next morning, I arrived at Carrington's headquarters 15 minutes early, palms sweating beneath my gloves. The lobby was pristine glass walls, sleek furniture, and a receptionist who offered me coffee and called Elliot's assistant the moment I gave my name. Mr. Carrington will see you now. His office was minimal and bright, overlooking the Mississippi River. He stood when I walked in, offering a warm but direct handshake. "Camilla," he said, "I didn't expect to be this disappointed on a Friday morning." I sat heart-pounding. "I didn't expect to be fired on a Thursday afternoon." He nodded slowly. "What happened?" I told him everything. Not dramatically, not bitterly, just the facts, the handoff, the termination meeting, the file transfer. I left out the part about crying in my car afterward. When I finished, Elliot leaned back in his chair. "Do you remember Chicago, 2011, he asked. I frowned. "The tech summit." He nodded. I was a nobody, trying to pitch a half-baked software platform in front of a crowd of VCs who barely looked up from their phones. "You pulled me aside afterward and said, 'Your product's confusing, but your heart's in the right place.' Then you helped me rewrite the entire pitch on a napkin at a hotel bar." I blinked, memory surfacing in flashes. "I haven't forgotten," he said. "You didn't know me, you didn't owe me, but you saw something. And now I see something in you." I opened my mouth, but he held up a hand. "I'm not here out of gratitude. I'm here because you're the only reason Carrington considered Beacon in the first place. It wasn't their brand. It was you." I sat in stunned silence. "Come work with us," he said simply. "Lead strategic partnerships. Build something better. You'll have full autonomy and the chance to finish what you started." My breath caught Elliot. "I appreciate this more than you know, but I don't want this to be a favor." "It's not, it's a correction." I smiled despite myself. "You move fast." He grinned. "When someone hands you a $40 million deal, wrapped in competence and integrity, you don't hesitate." I looked down at the folder he'd slid across the desk. It had my name on the label. A job offer. When would I start Monday? "If you say yes." I looked him in the eye. "I'll think about it." And I meant it. But deep down, I already knew. Beacon and Brand had no idea what they had let go. And soon they'd realize exactly what they'd lost. Sunday afternoon found me at my dining table, sunlight slicing through the blinds, and onto the folder Elliot had given me. I'd read the offer 3 times already, but something about seeing my name in that header, Camilla Rowan, Director of Strategic Partnerships, still didn't feel real. The salary was generous, the benefits impeccable, but that wasn't what made me hesitate. It was the autonomy, the trust, the implication that I'd be building something, not just executing someone else's vision. My whole career, I'd been the workhorse behind the scenes, the name buried in slide footers and shared credit emails. But now, someone I respected deeply was offering me a seat at the table and asking me to bring the blueprint. At 7:08 p.m., I hit reply on Elliot's follow-up email. Subject read, "Tomorrow, Elliot. Thank you for your faith in me. I accept. Let's build something better, Camilla." 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed. "Elliot. Didn't even need to twist your arm. Welcome aboard. Monday morning, 9 a.m. Bring your fire." Monday arrived like an exhale I didn't know I'd been holding. Carrington Digital's office, open floor plan. Natural wood accents. Quiet. Hum of focused teams. Felt nothing like Beacon's polished but clinical halls. Elliot introduced me to a lean team of strategists, analysts, and product specialists, smart, diverse. No nonsense. The air smelled like coffee and momentum. "We're not interested in being the biggest," he told me. As we walked the floor, just the smartest, the most trusted. He led me to a corner glass office mine. There was no nameplate, no stiff onboarding video, just a post-it note on the monitor in Elliot's handwriting. "You know what needs to happen. I trust you to do it." By Wednesday, word had spread. Beacon and Brand had lost the Carrington contract. Completely. The final blow came when Elliot's legal team sent formal notice to terminate discussions with Beacon due to personnel changes affecting the strategic relationship. No names were mentioned, but everyone knew. Owen texted me that night. "Owen Pratt. Walter looks like he aged 10 years. Marsha's been in closed-door meetings all day. No one's talking, but the mood's grim." I didn't reply right away. I sat with it. The poetic symmetry, the justice of it, but also the quiet sadness I had given them years. loyalty nights and weekends, and they'd discarded me like surplus furniture. Now they were scrambling, and the client they thought they had in the bag had slipped through their fingers, not because of some vendetta, but because of a truth they refused to see. Relationships outlast resumes. Elliot and I agreed to restart the vendor process, a clean open RFP, no favoritism, no shortcuts. "We're going to do this right," he said. "If your strategy still wins, it means we made the best choice. Not just the personal one. That was Elliot fair to a fault. And it was exactly what I wanted. I gathered a lean team, including Paige, and 2 internal advisors, and got to work. Over the next 2 weeks, we built a new solution, more modular, more intuitive, and better integrated with Carrington's existing tech stack than anything Beacon had ever envisioned. I didn't copy a single line from the original strategy Beacon now claimed as theirs, but every idea in it had always been mine. One evening after a long work session, Paige walked over with 2 mugs of chamomile tea. "You okay?" she asked. Sitting across from me, I nodded. "Yeah, just a little stunned." "It's all happening," she smiled. "You earned this, Camilla." "All of it. I keep waiting to feel angry," I admitted. "But all I feel is free." Paige raised her cup. "To freedom, then." We clinked mugs gently. Outside, snow began to fall again, blanketing the city in white. A reset, a reclamation. A door I hadn't even known existed was now wide open, and this time I was walking through it on my terms. The conference room at Carrington Digital was modest by corporate standards. No marble, no gold trim, just a sleek oak table, high-backed chairs, and a long glass wall that framed the frozen Mississippi River like a painting. It was Tuesday morning, decision day. Carrington's executive board sat across from me, folders in front of them, eyes expectant. I took a breath, steadied myself, and stepped into the quiet. I wasn't here to prove I was enough. I was here to demonstrate what Beacon and Brand had never truly seen. "Let me start by saying this," I began. "Carrington Digital doesn't need another agency. You need a partner. Someone who listens like a strategist, solves like a builder, and delivers like their name is on the line." A few heads nodded. I clicked the remote and brought up the first slide. A visual flow of client pain points mapped from Elliot's earliest feedback sessions to the final RFP specs. This isn't a one-size-fits-all solution. This is a dynamic, adaptive roadmap built around your evolving needs, especially in year 3 when your cloud migration will be complete. I could see it landing. Their eyes were focused, engaged. This wasn't the fluff Beacon used to package. This was meat data. Understanding precision. One of the VPs, a man named Harris with salt and pepper hair and a reputation for skepticism, leaned forward. "How did you anticipate the licensing conflict in Phase 2? I smiled. "I didn't anticipate it. I remember when your procurement director flagged it in a LinkedIn comment last fall. It wasn't in the brief, but I pay attention." A silence followed, the kind of silence that speaks volumes. Then someone chuckled. "Well, damn." The rest of the pitch moved like music, point by point, objection by objection, answered before they even voiced it, not because I was reading minds, but because I'd taken the time to care. When I finished, I turned off the projector and stepped back. No agency knows your systems better. No partner has invested this much time without a contract in hand. You've seen what I bring. I hope now you understand why I never needed a fancy title to do it." There was a pause, and then Elliot, who had sat silently through the entire presentation in the back of the room, stood. He clapped slowly, deliberately. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "I believe we found our partner." By Thursday, the papers were signed. $45 million, 5-year term, full-service deployment. It was Carrington Digital's largest vendor agreement to date, and I was the one who negotiated it from both sides. Owen called that afternoon. "They're losing their minds in the office," he said, voice barely containing glee. Walter's gone radio silent. Marcia tried to spin it as Carrington pivoting to a different scope. I smirked. Was she in the meeting when they found out she was leading the meeting? Until legal came in and showed the official notice, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. That night, I sat on my balcony with a glass of red wine, watching headlights glint off icy streets below. The wind carried the sound of distant laughter. Someone's dinner party, maybe, or a couple walking their dog. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was chasing something just out of reach. I had my name on a contract, my vision in execution, my voice in the room and the strategy. The one they thought they could steal that had always been mine. The internal announcement hit inboxes like a quiet bomb. Subject leadership transition announcement. Time, 8 to 14 a.m. I was already halfway through my second coffee preparing for a morning alignment call when my phone buzzed with a string of notifications. It had happened. I clicked open the email, though I didn't need to. The headline said it all. Effective immediately, Walter Hensley has stepped down as Chief Executive Officer of Beacon and Brand. We thank him for his years of dedicated leadership and wish him the best in his future endeavors. An interim CEO will be announced next week. There was no mention of Carrington, no nod to recent events, just a quiet, carefully crafted farewell that read like an obituary, but I knew the truth. Everyone did. Owen texted me 3 minutes later. Owen Pratt stocks down 17%. Board called an emergency vote at 2 a.m. last night. They pushed him out. Owen Pratt again. Word is Marcia's next. I didn't reply right away. Not because I wasn't surprised, I wasn't, but because the moment carried a strange emotional weight. For 8 years I had worked under Walter. We'd never been close. He had always viewed me as dependable and visible, the kind of employee who did the grunt work and never asked for a seat at the table. When I delivered, he nodded. When others took credit, he stayed silent. And when I landed the Carrington deal, he fired me before the ink dried. Now, he was the one being ushered out, quietly, strategically, the same way he had done to me, poetic really. Later that day, I got a call from a friend in finance, someone who occasionally fed me whispers from within Beacon's investor network. They lost 2 institutional clients this week, she said. One of them explicitly cited concerns about leadership stability, and apparently a major client requested a clause allowing for exit if specific team members are removed from their account. I raised an eyebrow. That sounded familiar. She chuckled. Camilla, you've become a case study. At 3:00 p.m., another internal memo leaked. This one wasn't public, not yet, but Owen forwarded it to me with the subject line. You'll want to sit down for this one. Confidential, effective immediately. Marcia Dunning has been placed on administrative leave, pending internal review of protocol breaches related to the Carrington digital account and the removal of key personnel from high-value strategic initiatives. I read it 3 times. Protocol breaches, personnel removal, high-value initiatives. They weren't just cleaning house, they were naming the storm that broke the windows. Owen called me that evening, voice low as if he was still at the office and afraid the walls might hear him. People are shaken. Cam, half the team didn't even show up today. Everyone's paranoid. Morale is in the gutter. I think this is the beginning of something bigger. I pictured the halls I'd walked for nearly a decade, once filled with buzzing strategy chatter and whiteboard scribbles, now quiet, sterile people walking on eggshells. What about you? I asked. He exhaled. I'm done. I'm giving notice on Monday. I paused. Do you know where you'll go? I was kind of hoping you'd have a place for me. A smile pulled at the corner of my mouth. I might. That weekend, Owen came over with a 6-pack of IPA and a worn-looking portfolio folder. His energy was different now, lighter, freer. I never realized how toxic it had gotten until I left the building, he said, cracking open a bottle. We talked for hours about Beacon, about all the late nights we pulled about, how many times we'd made others look good without recognition. It's not that I wanted glory, he said. I just wanted fairness. I nodded. Same. When I offered him a strategic operations role on my team, he didn't hesitate. Just tell me where to sit, he said, and let me build something real. In the weeks that followed, my team grew. Quietly, steadily. I didn't poach aggressively. I didn't make big announcements. But when someone reached out, a thoughtful, overlooked mind from another company who had heard whispers of what we were building. I listened, and I hired. We weren't the loudest team in the industry. We didn't have the fanciest titles or the glossiest LinkedIns, but we delivered again and again. And something beautiful began to happen. We were earning trust not through performance decks, but through consistency. Clients came big ones who used to think pedigree was everything. Ones who'd seen what Beacon had done and decided they wanted something different, something real. One afternoon, I found myself alone in my office, looking out over the same city skyline I had once stared at with a box of belongings in my lap. It felt worlds away now. Beacon hadn't just lost Carrington, they'd lost their pulse, their compass, because they'd mistaken noise for leadership and presence for power. And in doing so, they'd set the whole ship on fire from within. 1 year had passed since I walked out of Beacon and Brand with a box in my hands, and my dignity barely intact. In that year, a lot had changed, and almost none of it by accident. Carrington Digital had expanded rapidly. Our team grew from 12 to nearly 50. Our strategies had helped 3 Fortune 100 clients scale beyond their digital plateaus, and I had been promoted from director to chief strategy officer. The first woman in the company's history to hold the role, but titles never interested me. What mattered was that I finally had the power to build something that lasted not for applause, but for impact. Still, nothing could have prepared me for the moment I opened the attendee packet at the Chicago B2B Leadership Summit and saw the name I hadn't said aloud in almost a year. Marcia Dunning, Senior Partner, Riverton and Hale, Consulting. My fingers hovered over the name like it might burn. A year ago, she fired me. Now she would be pitching to me. Life doesn't always hand you full circle moments, but when it does, you learn to meet them with stillness, not vengeance, because the higher you rise, the quieter your revenge becomes. The vendor review session was scheduled for 1 p.m. in a private conference suite on the 24th floor of the Hyatt Regency. As I walked in, I saw her immediately. Marcia hadn't changed much, still sharp suit, crisp blazer hair, tucked into an immaculate bun, but her confidence didn't radiate the same way. There was something else beneath the surface now. Restraint, hesitation, maybe even regret. She saw me, blinked once, then composed herself, like the seasoned player she was. "Camilla," she said, offering her hand with a thin, polished smile. I took it firm and brief. "Good afternoon, Marcia." The Carrington executive team settled around the table. There were 5 of us, Paige, myself, our head of procurement, and 2 senior VPs from legal and technology. Paige gave me a slight glance. She knew the history. She also knew I wouldn't let it bleed into the meeting. "Let's get started," I said, tapping my pen. Marcia began with practiced poise. Her deck was neat, well-formatted. She referenced trends, cited benchmarks, even threw in a few future-forward phrases about AI alignment and adaptive strategic ecosystems. But it all felt hollow. There was no heartbeat behind it, no client insight, no intimacy with pain points. It was the kind of presentation you give when you're pitching for business, not when you're solving someone's problem. As she clicked to her final slide, I closed my folder. "Thank you for your presentation," I said evenly. Just a few questions from the panel. I let procurement and legal go first. Questions about deliverables, timelines, risk mitigation. Then I leaned forward. If selected, I asked, who would lead the relationship on your side? Marcia didn't miss a beat. I would personally. I've had years of experience overseeing enterprise accounts, including Carrington. In fact, during my time at Beacon and Brand, the words hung in the air. She said them with intention, like she thought they might help. I studied her face, not a hint of apology, just calculated, recall, as if invoking that history would build credibility instead of raise flags. "And how would you characterize your tenure with Carrington?" I asked, voice low, deliberate. She faltered. "Just for a second. A strong foundational relationship," she said, though unfortunately not every project came to fruition as planned. Translation: I lost the contract after firing the person who built it, and you're the one who knows it. I nodded slowly. Thank you for the clarification. That was all I needed to say, because the power wasn't in the words. It was in the silence that followed. After the meeting, Paige and I stepped out into the hallway. She handed me a bottle of water and gave me a look. That was gracious. I didn't need to be anything else. She tried to spin the past into a credential. I nodded. It wasn't her worst move, but history remembers outcomes. Paige smirked. So, are we considering them? No. You sure? She may have learned from her mistakes. But I don't reward people for stepping over others and calling it leadership. There's nothing innovative in borrowed slides. That night, I flew back to Minneapolis. My apartment was quiet, too quiet after a day like that. I stood by the window watching headlights flicker in the snow and reflecting on how far I'd come. Not just professionally, but emotionally. A year ago, I'd been broken open, shoved aside, silenced by people who mistook power for wisdom. But now I led a team that built quietly, delivered relentlessly, and never confused volume with value. The next morning, I arrived early to Carrington HQ. Before the first meeting, I slipped into my corner office and stood in front of the framed diploma on the wall, Idaho State University, class of 2006. I hadn't hung it there to prove anything. I hung it as a reminder that where you begin doesn't define where you finish, that credentials open doors, but character keeps them open, that sometimes the person they call too quiet ends up holding the mic. 2 days later, I received an email from Riverton and Hale, Camilla. Thank you for the opportunity to present. Regardless of the outcome, I appreciate the professional courtesy and the time you gave us. Marcia. I stared at the message for a long moment, and then with a steady breath, I clicked, archive. Some things don't need a reply, not because you're angry, but because you've already said everything you needed to just by being in the room. Never underestimate quiet strength. Camilla Rowan wasn't the loudest voice in the room, nor did she have the fanciest credentials, but she delivered results with integrity, insight, and consistency. When others dismissed her, she didn't retaliate with anger. She responded with excellence. Her story reminds us that true leadership isn't about titles or pedigree. It's about character relationships and the courage to keep building, even when others try to tear you down. In the end, the people who overlook you may find themselves sitting across the table hoping for your approval, and that's the most powerful kind of justice.